Hi, Julie Usher, Recipes for a Sweet Life. We are about to start another chocolate lace wrap video, and because chocolate pairs so wonderfully with a red wine, I'm going to tell you now about my Club W promo. Club W is an online wine club where you enter your palate preferences and they will automatically send you 3 custom suited bottles of wine each month to your taste, and you can order each month or every other month or every 3 months depending on how often you want wine. The deal here is, if you join their club, you will get $26 off your first order. If you enter, and you'll see a little badge hopefully running under the screen, if you enter Sweet Life, SWEETLIFE, as the promo code upon checkout. I'll have more information about this promotion and also about Club W on my websites, and links will be in the video description. So before I get started, I'm gonna have a sip of the red wine that I just got from them. I got my first monthly shipment. And then we're going to get started. This is a Syrah, Edna Valley Syrah, and it's delightful. But I don't want to drink too much or my chocolate lace is going to be really crazy. So I'm going to stick that off to the side. Okay, chocolate lace. We've done a few chocolate lace videos to date. We did one that was an open lattice chocolate work, my very first one, which was just solid dark chocolate, no other colors. Last month or a month before that, we did one that was solidly colored. It had dark chocolate in it too, but it was solid chocolate all the way through. I'm going to do a little bit of a hybrid and a slightly more advanced one today. It's got the dark chocolate, it's got colors, not quite as many as last time, but it's got a combination of open lattice work up at the top with some parts filled in and solid colored chocolate at the bottom. The other way this is distinct is that it's much more patterned. Before, my solid chocolate piece at the bottom was just free-form flowers. Here I've got discrete little archways, if you will, where I've got little patterns, floral patterns in between. So it's a much more measured and more precise design than last time. So it's going to take probably about the same time, but it gives you a much more structured look. And just imagine that tier to be a really beautiful wedding or birthday cake. First things first, you want to get your cake that you're going to be covering with the chocolate all ready to go, smoothly iced. It doesn't need to be perfect. This one I got at the store. The icing isn't perfect, but it is straight up and down on the sides. And that's, if you see a swipe or two, no big deal. But you want to make sure it's straight up and down the sides to start. Use a bench scraper if you need to, a hot one, to smooth out the sides. I've already done that. It looks good. It's situated on its plate. My plate has no lip, which means it's going to be easier to wrap the chocolate around it. If there's a lip, a little edge, you kind of have to sink the chocolate in to get it around the cake, and that can get tricky. So choose a plate that's completely flat. I'm going to stick that back in the fridge. I will want the icing tacky so the chocolate will stick onto it when we wrap it, but I've got probably an hour of piping time here, and so this could get very, very soft in the meantime, and I want to make sure it doesn't get too soft. So I'm going to stick that back in the fridge. I'll come back and talk about my template, and we'll get started with the piping. We're ready to start piping. The first step is, in this particular case, is laying the dark chocolate to create kind of the pattern. Now, as I said, this is a much more structured cake. I started by just sort of roughly sketching out. My sketches are all very rough. The pattern I wanted. I envisioned these kind of archways with some flowers in them, and then this sort of loopy pattern up at the top. When I got the actual cake and measured it, it's about 3 3/4 inches tall. So I wanted to make sure my total piece of acetate was taller than that. This is about 4 inches tall, so I've got about a 1/4 inch of handling room at the top. This line here marks the top of the cake. Well, actually, the cake is between 3.5 and 3 3/4. So I know that my chocolate needs to end right between those two lines in order to clear the top of the cake. And then I've marked out sections. Oh, these are roughly every 2.5 inches apart to create my archways. These archways were just drawn with an oval cookie cutter. I actually drew on this side of the parchment paper with a marker, and acetate. And so I'm flipping it over to pipe on the side that doesn't have the pen marks, because the pen marks will come up on the white chocolate. Now, a word on the acetate. I like to use a 3 mil acetate, which is pretty flimsy, you'll see, as opposed to a really stiff one, because that way it just comes off the chocolate that much easier. Sometimes the thicker ones don't bend as well, and they can sometimes break the chocolate when we ultimately take it off the cake. Just testing my chocolate. I've simply melted semi-sweet chocolate here. I have detailed notes about the types of chocolates I use and the brand in the video description, and I'll have a melting video coming up soon. And we're going to start piping. You can also do this on parchment, but when you pipe on acetate, the result is a little bit of a shinier finish. I'm working with untempered melted chocolate. I do not temper the chocolate, same thing as in the other lace videos, because otherwise it can set up too fast before I get through the piping and become too brittle to wrap around the cake. So I'm going to start by laying a guide down at the very bottom to mark the bottom of the cake. I'd like to break as little as possible because a blob of chocolate will appear at the break. So you'll see me sliding this board. I'm working on cardboard so I can bring this all down to my fridge without having to lift the acetate when it's time to chill it. And I'll be sliding this as I move down the length of it. Let me clear some more area here. I'm going to reinforce that bottom bit with a little bit of a zigzag, just gives it a little more structure at the bottom. And then I'm just going to be tracing all the markings I have and then adding the loopy patterns. Again, I'm letting my chocolate fall, I'm not dragging it, so I get a nice rounded line. Okay, so I ended up doing a top border too, which is where the top of the cake is going to land. And now I'm just tracing the little triangular sections I'd marked off earlier, which are going to enclose the loopy patterns at the top. I'm trying to break at logical points, so rather than in the midpoint of a line, at the end of a line. I often work on a rolling stool when I do this. I was in my basement where I typically do a lot of my decorating work. My kitchen down there, I have a rolling stool. It allows me to kind of go down the length of it without having to move this piece as much. Okay, now I'm going to trace the archways. I'm going a little more slowly here because my chocolate's cooled down a little bit, so it's not flowing as fast and I don't want to break the line. Plus, I find I need to go a little more slowly to get nice rounded shapes. Okay, now in that particular pattern I had a little loopy design on the top of each arch, and I had them pretty large wide open loops so I could come back in and fill them in with color later. So I'm going to start on those. Again, I'm going a little more slowly than on my straight lines because I want to make sure those loops stay pretty open so I can get color in them later. They're going to be less open at the very top here. I didn't leave a lot of room at the top. So I've got all the basic outlines down, some reinforced little scrolly patterns in key areas, and now I'm going to go fill in these gaps. I'm right-handed, so normally I'd work left to right all the way down one pattern just so I kind of get in a groove and a rhythm, and then I'd come back and do another area all the way down. But for the purposes of today, since we're on time-compressed video schedule, I'm going to work this one whole area, which will basically give you a sense of the pattern that's going to flow all the way down the entire length. So I have little flower patterns in the middle of these arches, and I start typically by doing the big flower pattern. I'm leaving it open in the middle so I can get a colored center in there later. I'm doing this freehand. If you wanted to be really particular about it, you could put a pattern behind here and pipe and trace that. But I think the freehand pattern looks cute enough, so we're going to go with that. So I've left, where there would normally be a dot, I've left a space to put in color later. And then I'm going to do a leaf that kind of reaches up to the top and some leaves that kind of fill in the sides. Maybe even a leaf down here. And then we'll come back in later and fill this all in with color. Now for these triangular zones, I've got a loopy pattern that goes kind of straight up here, just facing up. So I start by an anchoring point, and then I'm just drawing loops off to the side of the triangle. I think I can fit 4 or 5 in, 4 into the side, 1 at the top. For these areas in between, I've got loops facing up. I've got 3, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. And I want to repeat that on the end, of course, as well. For the triangles that face down, my loops face down. Same pattern as I went going upright. Just going the opposite direction. Now you may find, as I do, that piping this pattern upside down is a little harder than piping it right side up. So what I'll probably do is pipe the entire length down, turn this upside down, and pipe these upside down patterns right side up. So now I'm in an upside down triangle. It's just much easier for me to, for whatever reason, to pipe this way. So the beauty of having it on the cardboard is you can alter the orientation of the wrap to whatever suits you piping wise. You'll notice I'm always steadying the tip of my cone with the forefinger of my non-piping hand, and that helps tremendously in terms of keeping a steady line. For those of you who've asked about how things look so steady, that helps me a lot. And then just moving in a very even cadence without interruptions. Okay, now we're not going to let this set up yet. We're going to fill it while the dark chocolate is still loose with other colors. I'm going to come back with a yellow, which is white chocolate. Again, my chocolates that I use are in the video description. It's chocolate tinted with an oil-based food coloring. If you use a water-based food coloring, it will seize the chocolate and make it very thick. So make sure you're always using an oil-based food coloring. And I'll talk about tinting the chocolate in my melting video as well. Okay, I'm back. I lied. I'm working with the pink first because I want to get the dots down in the center of these flowers before I surround them with yellow. It's easier to get the nice round pink center in that way. I'm working with fairly lightly colored chocolates this time as compared to the last video that I did where they were pretty dark. So I would say I have probably about a drop and a half of candy color into 2 to 3 ounces of chocolate to get this light color. It does, the pinks and such color very, very darkly, so you have to work with it sparingly. And the only note of caution here is I'm trying not to touch the dark chocolate because it is wet and I don't want to smudge it. Remember, this is the back side of the lace. This is the side that will be against the cake. So any imperfections here are less important than what's going to reveal on the other side. Turning it upside down, I'm going to fill the loops in these upside down triangles. And this is where I need to be extra careful about not really hitting the chocolate because the lines are much closer together. If you find your white chocolate's too thick, which can sometimes happen, if it overheats even slightly, it tends to thicken up. You can thin it out by adding some shavings of cocoa butter or palm oil, which will loosen it up temporarily, so it flows a little bit better. I haven't done that here. Seems to be flowing okay right now. So we'll continue in this vein, filling. Okay, now I'm back with the yellow chocolate, and that's going to fill in the daisies, obviously, around the pink centers, and also the upright triangles at the very top. Just trying not to touch the other chocolates. If I feel I have, you'll notice I'll sometimes wipe the tip off. That's so I don't drag any dark chocolate into the next area that I pipe, because otherwise that'll leave a dark chocolate impression in the middle of an area where I don't want it. So if you do hit the chocolate, take a little time just to wipe the tip off and you'll get cleaner results. So the other areas I want to fill are these upright triangles. This chocolate's flowing a little more fluidly than the pink. You'll notice that it's leaving less ridges, and that's because I did add some cocoa butter to it to enhance the flow. It was getting a little thick because it was sitting on the heat over there trying to stay warm, and I overheated it slightly. So you can recover slightly thick chocolate. Okay, I'm back with the green, which is the second to last color. I'm just going to fill in the leaves with this. Same process. I'm not going to worry about getting in between these two lines here if I just fill the whole back side. When I do so, we'll still see that when we pop off the reverse image on the cake. So you don't have to be too fussy about filling these. It's faster if you just cover that line. Okay, I'm back with the last color, which is blue, which is going to be used to fill in all around these little ovals and these little upward loops that I have yet to fill. Now, because everything else has been laid pretty precisely in and around the brown, inside the brown borders, I can be a little more carefree with this blue. If it overlaps any of the other colors, it's fine because it's going to be on the back side and it's not going to show. One other thing to note, this template, as I said, is pretty defined. I will have a PDF of it, a link to it in the video description if you want to get it, and also some discussion there about the length of the strip. Of course, the strip needs to be a certain length to get all the way around your cake, which will depend on the diameter of your cake. So I talk about that in some of my other lace wrap videos, so we'll just have the note in the video description. This is pretty loose. Again, I loosened this with a little bit of cocoa butter just to ensure that it would flow nicely, because I have a fairly large amount of area here to cover, just filling in all these areas with blue. One thing I didn't do on this wrap, which I did on the one that is now back in the fridge, is I pipe little pink dots in these loops around each arc, and I might come back and do that just before we put this in the fridge, just because it does make a nice pretty accent. Okay, I've got all the color down. You'll notice that I went back in and I did put those pink dots in around each arch. One note here, it really would have been smarter for me to do that when I first laid the pink down, because in filling all the other areas with blue and green, I kind of pushed those dark chocolate loops closed, some of the dark chocolate spread into the areas that I would have filled with pink. So I think when we unveil this, though they look pretty full here, I think when we unveil it and see the right side, they're going to look less filled than they would have if I had done the pink first as opposed to very, very last. And that's how I did it on the cake that I had out in display, and which I'll be showing scrolling through the screen. So you may see a different result as a result of order of operations. So bear that in mind. Now this is a 2-stage chilling process as always. So this is going to go in my fridge. I'm going to carry it down on a big sheet tray into my bigger fridge where I've cleared out a shelf. I'm going to let it set for a couple of minutes till it's just tacky but still pliable, and then we're going to wrap it around the cake. So the lace has been in the fridge for a couple of minutes. My cake I took out of the fridge about 10 minutes ago just so the icing's a little bit tacky. And I think we're ready to wrap. So I'm picking it up by the parts of the acetate that I left empty for handling. And I start by anchoring it to the back of the cake. And the only area I really press is right there in the back to anchor the lace. Otherwise, you'll smudge the rest of the lace. And then I just use the bottom guide of the plate to make sure that I'm not lifting the lace up as I wrap. So I'm kind of running it along the edge of the plate. And you'll notice a fair amount of overlap. I like purposely to have overlap. So I'll just press down at the seam where they come together, and actually I'm going to do that facing me so I can see what I'm doing to make sure it's making good contact. And I'll leave that free floating because I'm going to peel that back later to get the acetate underneath it off. So that looks pretty good. And you can see how beautiful the wrap looks actually through the acetate already. Now we're going to set that back in for a final chill. Before we do that, I just like to put a little border on the upper edge just to help anchor that lace. I don't have a ton of lace overhang. In fact, I'm just right almost at the top of the cake. So I won't need a very big border, but I want a little bit. So I've got my Italian buttercream in my pastry bag. I'm just going to do a shell border. I call it a trailing star border. Same thing, just to help anchor. I'm trying to make sure I'm touching the chocolate where I can, obviously, in order to anchor it. Okay, we're back. This is chilled at least a half an hour. Sometimes I'll begin the unwrapping process in the fridge if my room is particularly hot. So that's a good tip to keep in mind. Keep that bottom shelf of your fridge or your middle shelf open so you can kind of work some of the cake in there. This will stay nicely up against a chilled cake at room temperature for many hours, but it just facilitates the unwrapping process if it's super chilled. And you can see the shiny, shiny finish. That's the result of working with acetate instead of parchment paper. Now, if I were to rip this all off right now, I'd end up not only taking off this piece here, but possibly taking off the chocolate underneath it and the chocolate to the side of it. So what I need to do is take a hot paring knife. I heated this paring knife in the flame on my stove. So it should be hot. I might need to reheat it. And I'm just scoring along the point where this acetate meets the overlapping chocolate. Hopefully trying to get a clean cut. As clean a cut as possible. A hot knife really helps here. And I don't think mine's hot enough. So I'm going to go heat it back up and continue this process. Okay, so I'm back. I literally stuck the blade into the flame. It's a lot hotter. And I'm getting through that chocolate a lot easier. Except at the bottom here where it's a little thick, so I might have to score a few times. Okay, once I'm all the way through, I can lift off that piece here, eat it, and then remove the rest of the acetate without disrupting the rest of the chocolate. It is a little bit stuck here still. I'm going to slide it out. There we go. Now, this acetate can be reused. Just wipe it off completely before you pipe on it again. And that looks beautiful. There are some junctures where I did these, you know, where the loops sort of intersect, where there's a lot of dark chocolate. And I want to finish that with some blue dots. I did a lot more detail on the cake that I had out here earlier, which has since been enjoyed and eaten, but you'll see a picture of it flashing up on the screen. I simply take melted chocolate and I pipe details on the side, and I add a lot of layers of texture and interest. For now, I'm just going to do simple blue dots on those big parts to show you basically how that works. Okay, to add my details, because this wasn't on a pedestal cake stand, I've elevated it. I've got a little non-skid material here so that my slippery glass cake stand can't slide off. And I've got my blue chocolate from before. I've just got it flowing really nicely. It's really pretty loose right now, so it's not leaving any kind of tag or little peak, which is what I like. And if you need to loosen it so it flows better, you can add a little bit of cocoa butter to do so. I'm just going to put simple blue dots here. On the piece that I did earlier, I had little white dots around the center big dot as well, which looked really great. So you can go crazy if you'd like. You can also put a bottom border on it if you like, but I think the chocolate border at the bottom is pretty clean. So I'm not gonna put an additional icing border there. It's not necessary. The one at the top does help the lace stay in place. And a bottom one would as well, but it's not so necessary. There's the finished cake, and I would actually probably stick a few flowers on top, which I have here. But first, I'm going to grab a glass of wine and remind you about my Club W promo. Again, Club W is an online wine club. If you join using the link below and using the coupon code SWEETLIFE, you'll get $26 off your first monthly purchase from their wine club. So I hope you do that, and I hope you tune in next time. Till then, live sweetly.